There we go.
There we go. Yep.
All right, we're good to go.
Very good. Good evening, everyone. Going to call to order the meeting of the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency of April 11th, 5:30, our regular meeting. Do a roll call. Myself, David Westmoreland, Lisa Cooper, Mary Peniston. Also joining us are our Executive Director, Brian, and our Accountant, Eugenia Lipinski, and Legal, Katie. Any public participation? Anyone from the public on? None? Seeing none, I'll move on to administration. And the first item is the approval of the minutes of the March 14th, 2023 regular meeting. Has everyone read them, and any comments, corrections, changes? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes of March 14th? Aye. Approve unanimously. We'll move on to financials. Approve the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency Statement of Revenues and Expenditures for Operating Fund 100 for the year to date February 28th, 2023. Eugenia?
Thanks, John.
Haven't
For
seen
the
you in a
year,
while.
I'm sorry, that's right, long time. For the year-to-date period ending February 28th, the operating fund 100 had actual revenues of $982,000 versus budgeted revenues of $952,000, which resulted in a favorable variance of $30,000. The actual operating expenditures of $1,145,000 versus budgeted expenditures of $1,158,000 resulted in a favorable variance of $13,000, which is mostly due to a favorable variance in personnel expenses and legal expenses of $49,000 that were paid to shipment for 1517 Chestnuts will be reimbursed when the LDA is signed. And the actual net operating deficit of $163,000 versus the budgeted operating deficit of $206,000 resulted in a favorable variance of $43,000.
Okay. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Seeing none, I'll ask for approval of the Norwalk Redevelopment Agency Statement of Revenues and Expenditures for the Operating Fund for February 28th. All in favor? Aye. It's approved unanimously. And we'll move on to business. Item number 5, design review. Consider for approval proposal design work at 3135 South Main Street. Turn that over to you, Brian.
All right, great. So yeah, you'll recall this at the last meeting. We had the design reviewer present on the project over there. It's the Residence Inn expansion. There's been some back and forth since with the project applicant and our design review team, but we wanted through their the discussion, there's a couple outstanding issues that we wanted to bring up tonight. And I know the applicant is prepared and had sent some materials in terms of their specific responses, mostly related to some minor comments regarding the door recessing and some window sills, but I'll let the applicant kind of just go over some of the outstanding issues as well as their responses, and then we can have a discussion from there. So I'll kick it over to you, Colin, I think.
Yeah, thank you. So thanks for the opportunity to speak before you again. As Brian mentioned, we've been back and forth with BFJ peer review, Frank Fish and Taylor Young. I've had a couple conversations with them over the past few months, and we've discussed the project at length, and they've reviewed the documents a few times. For the most part, I think their comments have made the project better. The 3 sticking points we have outstanding are, let me actually share my screen so that you can see that. So there's a pocket I'll call it a pocket park for lack of a better word, but essentially an alleyway between the two buildings that was created to accommodate the necessary utility transformer. And then we tried to reuse as much of the space as possible for function space that would be associated with the hotel. Initially, it was our hope that that could be located further towards the street and adjacent to it, and maybe create a gate that could lead that to be semi-privatized or opened up to the public at some point if there was an event going on and people could filter in and out of that space. But in discussions with the utility, that proved to be, in contradiction to what they were looking for in terms of securing access to their transformer and being able to pick and replace it in the event of an outage or a malfunction with the piece of equipment. So we felt like we made the best compromise for the space and created this little outdoor space that was an annex off of the indoor space. The hotel function space that could be used by the people that were renting the space, and there's a little bit of private outdoor space available, so creates an urban courtyard. It's not a particularly generous space, but I think in my own personal experience, sometimes these spaces can be quite special. So it's like if you're surrounded by brick facades with nice lighting and some nice furniture appointments, it could be a nice spot for like a wedding reception portrait or some sort of a party. So really setting the scene there, and we felt like it would be a good facility for the hotel to have. And the utility requested that the transformer be moved closer to the street and secured with the gates to keep the public from being able to access and keep other building occupants and owners presumably, and just people walking down the street from being able to put trash in that area or store items there. Just makes it difficult. So that was one item, and I believe Mr. Fish was accepting of that because it is the utilities requirement that we're working with. The other one that we didn't take particular exception to was he had suggested that we raise the sills of the windows, and I responded in our last round of comments, specifically the shop front windows, to be more in line with a traditional shop front that's elevated a little bit. And we don't have any objections to that, so we will gladly raise that. It's a little bit better of a waterproofing detail for us, so that's not under dispute. The last piece that we really took objection to was the further recessing of the windows and the glazing plane of the hotel. We feel that number one, it's already articulated fairly extensively compared to a lot of modern buildings that do get developed. So the glazing plane is already stepped back fairly far. It's a deep recess from the overhead, about 18 inches. The pilasters project pretty proudly. The distance to the glazing plane, once we construct the lower wall, is probably going to be a little bit more than 18, probably more in the neighborhood of 20 or so. Once the panning and things are installed on the window. And that's a fairly significant step. Then you also have the entablature projecting forward a little bit. It's detailed, so there's some profiling there and some moldings that really give that a little bit of meat. It's fairly tall in terms of the signage band, so it's got good presence. There's architectural lighting on the pilasters, and that's more or less in line with the brick pilasters up above, as you can see. So the face of the signage band is more or less even with the face of the pilasters, and then the pilasters up above are proud of the facade, the plane that the windows are in. So we feel like we've already got a lot of planes going on there, and this is a very constrained lot. Moving the glazing plane further inboard, we don't feel is going to improve the architecture any, and it's only going to take functional space away from what we hope is going to be a vibrant internal space. Based on recent projects that we've done, like the one Chestnut, this is the interior of a double volume space that we did right here on Chestnut Street. And there's been a couple times in the past year since the building's been occupied that's been full of life. There was recently an artist market this past fall, I believe, that was in there where there were, probably 100 or so people and various vendors in there that, kind of a pop-up bazaar, if you will. So there was lots of activity in there going on, and it functioned really well. And it was a space that felt good, and it didn't feel overly constrained when people were in there. And narrowing up a space like this, even by a few inches, is going to really impact the amount of program that you can squeeze in there. So it's like when you're talking about your electric room and your ADA accessible bathrooms and your other back of house services, it's like a lot of those things these days, as we trend towards more energy efficient buildings, just take up more and more space because we're dealing with equipment that we didn't have before, like makeup air units and higher efficiency air handlers, and the electrical requirements continue to evolve, and everybody wants their equipment to be safe. So there are service clearances that need to be adhered to, and sometimes inches do matter, and it's like compressing that space further is just going to be detrimental to what we can do in that space. And I didn't feel that the benefit was really there. It just seemed to be a comment that they were harping on, and really wanted to leave that decision up to you. It is worth pointing out that the door plane is essentially where the existing door plane is, and we are, by setting the pilasters back 18 inches from the property line or the right-of-way line, we are gaining almost a foot of sidewalk from what's there in the existing configuration. Then we've got these nearly 14-foot wide pockets that give you an additional 18 inches. So it is an increase in the sidewalk width from the get-go, and the recesses are going to give you a little bit more in terms of that feeling of expansiveness. And this is a congested area of sidewalk, so the extra foot is going to help, and the extra 18 inches is certainly going to help. But moving the glazing plane back 6 inches, I just don't see that that's going to do anything more beneficial than what's already being done. And I think at that point, you're almost trending to have the columns and the pilasters project too much, and they're going to look like they should be fully separated from the glazing plane. So those were a couple of our concerns with that comment, and I feel like we've, I feel like it already looks good, and I don't feel like the comment is going to aid to the architecture or really to the public realm that much. So that's the only sticking point that we have. Everything else, I think we've accommodated and came to an agreement on. And this was approved, I believe, unanimously by the zoning commission back in February. And I thought I had addressed those comments at the public hearing then. And that's it. So I'm available for any comments that you have on the project.
If I may,
Sure.
to go back to your Chestnut Street photo.
Sure.
With the sills in on South Main, it will be looking something like that from the inside.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and it's we probably go a little bit higher than the existing hotel, which I think I included a picture of that. The existing hotel, they're fairly low, so we'd probably pick it up a little bit higher than that. So probably somewhere between this and this one, I think is about 18 to 20 inches, and the hotel is probably only in the neighborhood of 8 to 10, so probably a happy medium. But I wouldn't think we'd go much higher than at the Chestnut Street project.
Okay, that looks very nice. I'll open the floor to any other questions.
I have a couple questions. This is David Westmoreland. How are you? How wide is the space, the function space?
I had that dimension on there. I think I described it in the narrative. Believe between the pilasters, it's in the neighborhood of 18 and a half feet. So you're starting to get into that too skinny realm. It's really starting to compress vertically, and you need some width. We do get some relief in the architecture there, but my concern is more just being able to create an elegant and dramatic space that's similar to the existing hotel lobby and our recent work at Chestnut Street that has a grandeur to it. It's going to be a little bit lower because one of the things that we did react to with the peer reviewer and was bringing the entablature down. That was one of their comments that we did.
So,
So we already stepped. Yep.
The reason I asked that is the design reviewers seem to want to use that space as storefronts, 2 storefronts, I think, as I recall. That's the way I read it anyway. And he was looking at recessing the doors so that it would mimic the, have some reference to the existing building of the doors. That's what I understood his comment to be. I don't agree with him regarding the use as storefronts. I did try to use the Marriott's meeting rooms upstairs once for a CMEC board meeting, and it was too small. And I do think this will be a good use because we need a space like that for meetings that really doesn't exist in South Norwalk particularly easily, like in the form of a hotel. So I don't have any issue with that at all. But it looks like on the drawing you're showing now, at least the drawings we looked at and the reviewer looked at, it had 2 sets of double doors in the 2 middle windows. And it looks like now you've changed those to single doors on, pushed up to the very ends of each side of the building. Am I reading that correctly?
I think so, yeah. So we do have, this is an egress door on the right-hand side, and then we do have an entry door on the left. We are somewhat flexible on this door that could probably be positioned in any one of those alcoves. They're designed to be identical and flexible. This one is an egress door that's picking up the stacking stair and discharging out into the street. So we do need a door down there to make that programmatic element work, but we are flexible on where that door is located. I believe I just located it on that side because that was the wide end of the space. If I remember, yeah. So that was kind of where the space was the widest, and I could accommodate an entry and mechanical program down at that end and create some definition of space there that was symmetrical along the facade, and also just balancing the entry door look. So
I actually think I like this better because the problem I had with the 2 double doors and the 2 middle ones was just that without recessing them, it just seemed weird. It seemed like you were going to just fall out of that space.
And also just kind of creating a space that wasn't broken up by doors. It's not a particularly high occupant load space, even for a function. A single door is going to accommodate well over 100 occupants for means of egress to the street. So I felt like putting the doors in the middle was just going to chop up the space, and then people are going to be entering into the middle of whatever's going on as opposed to the side. So there was that logic as well. You'd be able to set up some sort of a receiving here, but again, this is preliminary program. It is functional, I think, but we'd like to refine that as we go forward with the project.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments? Mary, Lisa?
For me, I think I like the comments that David, his questions. So I kind of along with David's questions.
Okay.
So I did have one other thing that I thought I asked be covered if we've talked through all this. In the consultant report on the existing building that was submitted with a zoning package that I saw, she recommended that key elements of the facade be preserved and reused somehow in the new building. And I wondered what the plans were for that.
Do you know which report that was? I'm only aware of the one from I don't remember his name, Mr. Devonshire out of New York, that was submitted with the application.
It was the one that talked about the tremendous brick spalling, and which I didn't agree with at all. It overstated the spalling and the condition of the bricks.
Okay, yeah, I think that was Mr. Devonshire's report. Sorry, you said she.
I thought it was a she. So
that's sorry. Okay. No problem. Yeah, he. I'd have to defer to the owner as to what they're willing to do, but you know, our charge was to look at this as a new construction build, and so far we haven't received you know, information to the contrary that they have any intention of doing otherwise. Alan, I think you're on. Can you shed any light as to your current thoughts on salvaging any materials from the building and reusing them?
I think the problem is, you know, as a lot of reports have highlighted, there's a lot of structural issues with the building, and the ability to try to retain anything, well, while we can try to do that, not sure how practical that will be. But obviously that's something we could take into consideration.
Well, I mean, because you're eliminating a building that's listed on the Register of Historic Places, typically, you know, some sort of mitigation efforts like reusing elements of the building is what people do. I mean, you know, the Walk Bridge came to town. They have a whole long list of things they're doing because they're destroying the bridge, which is listed on the National Register of Historic Places as an engineering feat. So they're spending millions of dollars on mitigation efforts. So, you know, we would like to see the same kind of effort, obviously in proportion to the investment of this project. It's not $1 billion like the Walk Bridge. So I think our expectations are reasonable. But there are some elements on the front that perhaps could be reused or, you know, mounted somewhere in the new building to reflect its heritage, that it was there.
We'd be happy to take a look at that.
That would be great.
Okay. No further questions? We'll move forward. David? No? Mary? None?
Good, thank you.
Well, I would make a motion to table this until they come back with their review of historic elements that can be reused.
Well,
Liz, anything on that?
Well, I think the best that we, good evening, and I apologize for joining late. I was having difficulty logging in. I think the best that we're able to do is to, as Alan Cosby indicated, if those freeze elements can be somehow removed from the structure prior to demolition and saved and not fall apart during that process. I think I may be speaking out of turn, but we'd be happy to incorporate them in some way, shape, or form within the building. Some of those freeze elements are in really bad shape and they won't be able to be replicated. For example, the one that's to the top of the building, I think half of the limestone has cracked and has deteriorated. But if there is a way that we can take those elements off, save them, and then provide them on the inside in some way, shape, or form, I don't think that my client is adverse to that. It's just a question of when we get to that point, if we can, we can. And if we can't, well, while we're trying to maintain them and save them, it may become problematic at that point. I'd hate for this to continue until such time as we actually remove those or try to remove them from the facade. I think we will certainly use best efforts to do what we can to maintain and preserve them for future use within. I think that's a fair statement, Alan.
Yes.
So can you do an inventory of those and of what you're going to try and examples of how you'd possibly incorporate them within the building? Because I would want to make that a condition of the approval. I do understand the realities of demolition, and we can certainly accommodate that.
I
don't want to just leave this as a statement in a meeting, because that gets lost.
Understood, Mr. Westmoreland. I apologize for interrupting. I think they were rather sufficiently cataloged in Michael Devonshire's report. He did mention them and explain what they were and what the deficiencies were with current conditions. But if this commission deems it appropriate for us as a condition of approval to use our best efforts to remove those 3 freezes, I think it's the name, the year, and the number of the building, and somehow incorporate them perhaps within the first floor space as an ornamental remembrance of the structure. I don't think that my client would be adverse to that, and we would use our best efforts to do so.
David, I'd be willing to move forward on with that best efforts condition. I think we can improve it and move forward with the understanding that they will use their best efforts to save that, and they will meet with us at some future date and review what they found. I don't see any need to hold this up any further.
Not to put you on the spot, Commissioner Peniston, what do you think?
I understand making sure that it gets documented and there's some way that it comes reported back is really the only assurance that it gets done. So I do agree it's important to get the project moving, but I would like some kind of assurance that it gets lost as a conversational point. So some way to document it. And even the way, that in writing that the intention would be to do such and such, and that there would be a report back about what happened and how it got used. I think then at least there'd be some kind of accountability back for what you're looking for.
That makes sense.
And just to be clear, we're talking about those 3 freeze elements: the name, the year, and the address.
Yes.
And I don't know if you all come up with any other creative ideas of any other materials. I'm thinking for that courtyard, if there's anything there that picks up on any of the materials. I don't know. But yes, I think that's the historic. I think David's looking for the historic piece, and being on the first floor would be great.
Well, it might be cool in the courtyard on the brick walls, but I'm not designing there. So.
Okay. Shall I try to make a motion here to approve the redesign as we've discussed, subject with the understanding that they will come back to us in a month or 2 from now to explain what your best efforts reveal and how you intend to use those freezes if you can? I'm sure you could put it in better legal language than that.
What would be the timeline is my only question for you to be able to identify what you can and can't use.
Colin, I don't know if you can answer that. I can't.
No, I can't answer that.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we, if this is acceptable, I would be happy to report back to this commission in a month to let you know where we are and what we've discovered. And if we don't have anything at that point, I'll certainly report that, and you can just bring us back a month after that so that we can let you, that's 60 days for us to give us enough time to figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And then you will have that continuing dialogue with us. Would that be acceptable?
Liz, can I, not to, just to interject really quick, the question it seems to be, I mean, we can figure out a way to reuse the stuff, right? That's a design question that's down the road to construction documents and an eventual building permit. But the real question I think is at hand is from the commission seems to be, can we save it? So we have there's a demo delay currently, right? Right. So it's like if there's an active demo permit, there's some clock on starting that work. So we would potentially be back before the end of the expiration of that delay.
Agree.
And I guess it's probably to Alan and his team to what that schedule looks like to investigate removal, right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're not going to do anything until we know where things stand with that component.
Right. So,
Well, the demolition delay, I believe, expires the latter part of the first week of June. So that gives, I think that gives sufficient time on our end to further investigate the ability of our team to save those 3 freeze components, or however many of them as we can, if we can't save all of them. And at that point, probably have an idea, at least from our end, a very preliminary idea of how they can be reincorporated either into first floor space or perhaps in the courtyard or somewhere else. And we can report back to you at that point prior to the demolition delay expiring.
yeah, I think the important thing is that they're 2 separate elements, right? There's the design exercise of incorporating these elements if they're able to be salvaged, and that's separate, from the preservation of them. So the project, shouldn't be hindered from moving forward, I guess, is what I'm wondering, if there's a way to separate out that, returning with that information. And, Alan could have consultants continue work on the construction drawings without being hindered by, a lagging approval from the redevelopment agency. That makes sense.
Well, it's fine if you come back twice, one on the feasibility after you've looked at it, and then later on what you've decided in terms of design. That's fine with me.
Just so I'm clear, the scenario would still be provided your approval pending this condition being satisfied, correct? So you wouldn't feel comfortable moving forward. Is that what you're saying, Colin, just to be clear?
I'm just trying to understand the process and make sure that, that our client's not hindered from moving forward with an approval based on preservation of some elements that might deteriorate when they're removed from the building. And then, we're a fully executed zoning approval, it seems like at this point, except for you guys. And, we'd be back for building permits. So I just,
If I understood Mr. Westmoreland and Mr. Igneri and others, there seems to be a desire to move this forward, to act on what's been proposed with the changes that Colin suggested in response to the BFJ report. And conditions of approval could be one that we return to you at some point in the future to explain whether or not those elements, whether it's feasible to maintain them, and if it is, then what we plan to do with them. So action could happen tonight with those 2 steps as conditions of approval. I think that's what I heard.
That's what I intended, and the way you summarized it is okay with me.
yeah, and I think Liz, you nailed it for me too. I think that that's what
I move
why you do the words.
So
David, are you going to?
I said I move what Liz said.
I second that motion.
We're happy to come back. We will keep you advised, keep you in the loop, let you know what's going on. But to get an approval tonight, move the project forward, that would be very beneficial at this point.
Okay.
Yep, we understand.
I make a motion to approve the design work as discussed, subject to updates on the facade inclusion. Does that work for everyone? No one's objecting? So do I hear a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? I can't see everyone, so please verbally.
Aye.
Aye. It sounds like it's a unanimous vote.
Thank you, everyone, for your time tonight and your
Thank you,
attention.
everyone.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you so much.
Liz, you're gonna have to rework that motion. Thank you.
All right.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
We still have. Is everyone satisfied with that, the way the outcome here? Now that
Yeah.
we're, okay, so we've approved that design, and we move on to item 6, which is new business. I don't see any. Ryan, do you have anything you want to discuss?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. I thought that was a good meeting. Thank you.
Hey,
Have a good
Brian,
evening.
can
Yeah.
you send me the link for the listening session from the Webster Lot thing? Can you send that out?
Yeah. Katie, you have that, don't you? On the website. We'll get that to you, David. We'll send it to everybody.
That'd be great. How'd it
Yeah.
go?
I went well. I think it was a lot of good feedback. I think the community was more focused on how we do it versus whether we do it. And I
Okay.
think I sent out actually an invite. We're trying to reconvene the community advisory committee that we did during the South Norwalk train station plan, to try to do some more localized, District B focused outreach as well, in addition to the larger public sessions.
Good.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, I thought you did a very nice job of handling it. It was a good open dialogue, and I was surprised how much people wanted to restrict parking.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think, and what I really appreciate, I actually just met, I don't know if you saw the woman that owns Sono Entertainment, the recording studios over there.
I wasn't watching it, I was just listening to it. Yeah.
Yeah, she's a tenant, and I actually went and met with her one-on-one today, and I think I'm going to do the same for all the find business owners as they're open to have those one-on-one discussions. I think more outreach the better throughout this whole process. And I think everyone's been taken aback. I think they're about how early on we're doing it, and I think that's the key point that I want to reinforce is this isn't already done. This isn't a done deal yet. We're still trying to obtain input, and I think that's been helpful.
Yeah, I felt like people felt like they were being listened to.
That's why we called it a listening session.
Well, people don't always listen and listen. I felt like they were
I
listening.
had to advertise it as such. I was trying not to talk. I usually don't get in trouble that way.
Yeah.
All right, good deal. Yeah, we'll keep you posted.
Thank you.
I'll
Okay.
do a more comprehensive update next month.
All right.
Thank you.
Take
Thanks.
care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Good night.